I call him the Forrest Gump of cover-ups.
You never know what you're going to get.
If the government needed a cover-up, Stan Pottinger would be there. If you get a settlement from the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, you've got to sign an NDA, which says that you will not go after any of your other perpetrators. He is caught on tape instructing these Iranians how to best smuggle arms. Lo and behold, the Department of Justice loses the tape, and that's treasonous. So essentially what you've got, an intelligence op being covered up by an intelligence op.
Wow.
I've gotten a beat on the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund. And that's really a superlative cover-up tool. There's 225 women have applied for settlements from the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund. And the fund has awarded 150 settlements. 8 women have declined. But if you get a settlement from the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, you've got to sign an NDA, which says that you will not go after any of your other perpetrators. So it's shutting down.
Meaning?
You can't go after anybody else. You're going to get this settlement.
Anybody that was in that black book is off limits to everybody who's signed.
Yeah. And that the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund was started by Jordana Feldman and then David Boies. And David Boies is a power broker attorney in New York. Well, he's a famous attorney. But David Boies has a very, very dark side. And we don't even know the criteria that they use for awarding settlements. These 2 therapists who I talked to, they help their clients apply for the victims' compensation. The therapists who had the clients that were under 10 when they said they were trafficked by Epstein, they were not awarded any kind of settlement, even though one of the kids knew a lot about the inside of Jeffrey Epstein's home. And both therapists who I've talked to felt that they weren't awarded any money because it went against the cover story. The cover story by the mainstream media is that the kids were 14. There wasn't anybody younger than 14. That's the mainstream media. So because it went against the cover story, those clients weren't awarded any money from the victims. And we have no idea, as I said, of the criteria that's used. I mean, it's really random. And some get 6-figure settlements and some get 7-figure settlements. We don't really know. I mean, it's not transparent at all.
And it's this attorney that's in charge of it?
Jordana Feldman and David Boies were the architects of the Victims' Compensation Fund.
Where's the money come from?
Epstein's estate, which has a lot of money. And David Boies has shown that he's not an exemplary paragon of ethics.
How so?
He's quite fond of using Black Cube, the retired Mossad mercenaries. He represented Harvey Weinstein. And Rose McGowan was one of the first actresses that came out and said, she'd been molested by Harvey Weinstein. And David Boies deployed Black Cube against her, and they infiltrated her life under false pretenses and tried to get her to say incriminating things that could be used against her, which she didn't. I mean, she ultimately figured out that these guys were, I don't know if she figured out they were Black Cube, but she ultimately figured out. And then the New York Times was writing an article about Epstein. There were a number of reporters there. And he deployed Black Cube against them, these New York Times reporters, trying to find dirt on them. And at the same time, he was representing the New York Times in a libel suit. I mean, total conflict of interest, but it wasn't even a speed bump. And David Boies, Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, the charlatan who came up with Theranos and how it was going to be able to take your blood and tell you everything that you needed to know about your life. People started to attack her, and David Boies deployed black cube on them too. He was actually on Theranos' board. So this is the kind of guy that we've got that's overseeing the victims' compensation, the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund.
Wow. When did you find out about Black Cube?
At some point between the last time I was here.
And how would you describe them?
Well, they're retired Mossad agents.
Only Mossad agents.
I think they're out of Israel, so they might be other type of Israeli intelligence agents, but definitely retired Mossad. And they do dirty deeds. But they don't do dirty deeds done dirt cheap. They just do dirty deeds, and I think they charge an exorbitant amount for them. And we've got David Boies using Black Cube to protect Harvey Weinstein, and the same guy is one of the architects of the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, which really shows pretty much right out of the gate that something is seriously awry with the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund.
Yeah. What? So I mean, how do they operate? How does Black Cube operate? Let's hear a scenario.
It all depends upon it's gathering intelligence on people. Like they went after David Boies deployed Black Cube on these journalists that were writing an article on Harvey Weinstein, and they were just looking for dirt on them that they could use to dissuade them to continue writing that article. And with Rose McGowan, they kind of infiltrated her life as like friends. And I mean, who knows what they were trying to do with her? I mean, probably trying to get her to exonerate Harvey Weinstein, but she never did. I mean, and she's been pretty much banished from Hollywood. Even though a bunch of women came out, she was like one of the first and the most vocal. And Harvey Weinstein had gotten away with that stuff for years.
Yeah.
It's, I've kind of come to think that Hollywood and Washington, D.C. have a certain kind of person.
Gee, I wonder what leads you to believe that.
But they're both, it's kind of interesting. Both people in Hollywood and D.C., it's a power thing. They have a tremendous amount of power. People in Hollywood have the power to really sculpt Americans' attitudes about a lot of different things. And of course, people in Washington, D.C. have the power to make laws that govern all of us. And Hollywood Babylon, there was a book written by a guy named Kenneth Anger, kind of a nasty piece of work, but he wrote a book called Hollywood Babylon. And someone needs to write a book called Potomac on the Sodom and Gomorrah on the Potomac. I mean, I think that would be a good book. That might even be one of my next books. I don't know. Sodom and Gomorrah on the Potomac by Nick Bryant.
It'll be a good one.
But with David Boies, he's handled all this litigation. And these women have to sign these NDAs. So the government has worked very hard to cover up Epstein, but it cannot tell these women that they can't sue their perpetrators, these other perpetrators. But if you get money and sign that NDA, that Victims Compensation Fund is doing something that the government can't.
Why do you think that he hasn't employed Black Cube on you?
Maybe he has. I'm just kind of too obtuse to know. I mean, I know I've had one death threat, but I might have had others. I'm just too much I'm too thick-headed to. I'm not inclined towards paranoia. So who knows what happens? I don't know. If you write the kind of stuff that I write, you cannot really be paranoid. That'd be if I had paranoid inclinations, I'd still be underneath my bed.
What else have you uncovered?
So what's really interesting is when David Boies started taking on these clients, these Epstein victims, he immediately or quickly conscripted a guy named Stan Pottinger, who was an assistant U.S. Attorney General. And I call him the Forrest Gump of cover-ups. If the government needed a cover-up, Stan Pottinger would be there. He covered up Kent State, where the 4 students got shot by National Guardsmen. There was a tape. The Justice Department had a tape of those soldiers being ordered to shoot, but the grand jury that Pottinger oversaw, that tape was never played. And actually, that tape didn't come out till like 2005. So he covered that up. And the FBI had a program called COINTELPRO, in which it completely trampled on the rights of Americans, open mail, and it sent during this period, a letter was sent to Martin Luther King, who was about to get the Nobel Peace Prize. And it had, I think it had like some tapes of King having an affair. And the letter, which I believe was written by William Sullivan, who was like the number 3 guy, told King that he needed to commit suicide before he accepted the Nobel Prize, or these tapes would come out. Coretta King, his wife, was called and told about his affairs. So it was really, COINTELPRO was really nasty, especially like with the American Indian movement and also the Black Panthers. And there's evidence that COINTELPRO definitely contributed to the death of Fred Hampton, who was a Black Panther in Chicago. But there was a member of the American Indian movement named Emery Aquish, and the FBI floated information that she was an informant, and she was murdered by 2 members of the American Indian movement because they thought she was an informant. So the church hearings, which looked into COINTELPRO, found all this stuff out about what had been going on. And they had 20,000 pages of documents, and they'd interviewed a number of FBI agents. And Stan Pottinger was going to come in and he was going to exact justice. And no one got indicted. Not a single person was indicted for COINTELPRO when Stan Pottinger was the Assistant Attorney General. And Richard Helms, the CIA had a program called Operation Chaos, where they were also doing domestic spying. And Stan Pottinger was going to exact justice with that. And Richard Helms testified before Congress that that no Americans had been spied on, and then the church hearings found out that a lot of Americans had been spied on, and their mail had been opened and other things. And Stan Pottinger was going to get to the bottom of that. And Richard Helms was charged with 2 misdemeanors and had to pay $2,000. And it's kind of interesting. Stan Pottinger he went out with Gloria Steinem for 9 years. Now, she wasn't a CIA asset also. The founder of the Americans or Women's Liberation, I mean, Steinem was getting money from the CIA. Now, she said that she was getting money in 59 through 61, but I found an article in a feminist magazine out of San Francisco that she was getting money from the CIA for the majority of the 60s. So her and Stan Pottinger were a couple. And CIA assets and love, what a wonderful story. But when Stan Pottinger left the Department of Justice, then he became an outright criminal. There was the October surprise where the Iranians had taken a number of hostages. And Carter was trying to get the hostages back. And it was really making Carter look weak. And some people from the Reagan campaign went to the Iranians and said, if you hold those hostages until Reagan is elected, we'll sell arms to you very cheaply. It was Iran-Contra. And Pottinger was in on according to the president of Iran, Pottinger was in on the ground floor negotiations of Iran-Contra. And then, now this is kind of amazing, he is caught on tape instructing these Iranians how to best smuggle arms from the U.S. to Iran. I mean, they got him. He's on tape talking to these two Iranians about it. And lo and behold, the Department of Justice loses the tape. And that paragon of integrity, Rudolph Giuliani, was overseeing the case. So Stan, and that's treasonous. To facilitate arms sale to an enemy. That's outright treason, but Pottinger walked. So here is the guy that David Boies conscripted to help with all this litigation. And it's very obvious that Pottinger has had a background in intelligence. And Epstein was an intelligence op. So essentially what you've got with Pottinger is you've got an intelligence op being covered up by an intelligence op.
Wow. No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.